It's amazing to me how fast robot vacuums are getting better and adding new features. It seems like all the time there's a new robot coming out that's just one step ahead of the competition. Weeks after I reviewed the Roborock S8 Pro Ultra, ECOVACS sent me their Deebot T20 Omni, which is coming out now and has a whole new rotating and lifting mopping system, dual brushes on the front, and a lot of other exciting new features. But of course, no robot is so perfect that I can't find things I would love to see improved. Although for an initial retail price of around $1,000, this robot gives you a lot of features for your money, and I think outperforms some robots that are more expensive. My name is Eric Welander. Welcome to my channel all about Apple smart home tech. And while robot vacuums aren't currently supported in Apple's Home app, I still think they're an essential part of any smart home these days, because who wants to spend time vacuuming, am I right? ECOVACS has had a number of their Deebot vacuums with rotating mops, and I think it's a really cool feature. But the really remarkable thing about the T20 Omni is that it has rotating mops that also lift up to 9 millimeters off the ground. So it can have pretty good clearance to get over a lot of rugs. And beyond that, it has an additional level of clearance with a suspension that can lift the robot up to 20 millimeters off of the ground to clear obstacles and work with things like deeper carpet. So in that sense, think of it like the all-terrain robot SUV, because it can easily navigate things like the air vents in my floor, no problem, where other robots tend to get hung up on those. Now we'll talk more about the mop performance in a minute, but speaking of obstacle avoidance, I'm very impressed with the T20 Omni. It does a great job navigating around toys that my kids leave on the floor. It even one time had a large truck in between it and getting to the dining room to vacuum the dining room, and it actually pushed the toy truck just a little bit to then open up a way for it to get around to get to the dining room. And it also has ability inside of the app to say that you want it to focus on the edges of rooms, which are areas that are commonly missed in my experience by a lot of robot vacuums. And as far as getting up over area rugs, I have these entryway rugs from Target that tend to mess with a lot of robot vacuums. They get just easily pushed up, and then the vacuum doesn't really know what to do with it. In general, the T20 Omni has done great getting over these rugs, and one time it did actually get foiled by the rug and have to stop, but the other time it actually realized that it was pushing the rug up the next time and then backed away from it and then went back onto the rug with a little bit of speed to get over it, and it all was executed perfectly, and it seemed to avoid my rugs that tend to just bother every robot vacuum. Now, all of this in mind, you should generally clean up the floors before you run a robot vacuum. You're just going to get better vacuuming results. And there's certain things, well, you can hope the robot would avoid, let's say, fruit on the floor or any kind of dog feces or something. You just, if it actually got into the vacuum, that would be a really messy scenario. So just spend like less than 60 seconds going around your floor, find the stuff you need to pick up, and then run the vacuum. It doesn't take much time, and you'll get much better results just because of simple physics. There's not things blocking your floor from being vacuumed. Now, the Deebot T20 Omni backs into its base, where then it can get its mops cleaned and dried and empty its dustbin. I think this is a great setup compared to, let's say, having to turn the robot around to both charge or then clean and empty the robot. It's nice to just have it go in one direction. But that said, it goes, as it's cleaning my first floor, back to the base a lot and cleans the mops. Now, the mopping performance of this is great. So it's definitely getting a lot of dirt, and this is on the standard setting. You can also set it to be a high setting to really focus on getting a good mopping job done. But in my experience, this all really just means that the vacuum takes a little bit longer to do its job than maybe some other vacuums, and it's fine in my opinion. It's a robot. I'm not spending time cleaning my home, the robot's doing it. And so if it takes a little bit longer, that's not usually a big deal for me. And I'd rather have cleaner, better mopped floors as a result of that. So in the base then there's a water tank, and so it's using water, in case you're wondering, to actually mop your floor. So not really using any kind of cleaner. So you don't really risk any kind of streaks or stuff forming there. And it does a good job of making sure the water doesn't add streaks to your floor. But then when the mopping is done, it empties that water into a dirty water bin. So you can just empty the dirty water bin in the sink and then fill the clean water bin with new tap water. Now, I should note, if you're less familiar with more advanced robot vacuums, of course, like many others, this one has a dustbin built into the base. So when the cleaning is done, the vacuum will also empty its dustbin from the vacuum itself into the base. And I love how ECOVACS has designed this base where there are doors that kind of close off these areas, and it makes the whole thing look very sleek. Like you could put it somewhere and it's not going to detract from your interior design. But then you also sort of have to know how to open the doors, where the doors are, to get the water tanks out to change them, or to change the bag that the vacuum empties its dirt into. Now, the design of the physical robot itself leaves a few different places where I'd like to see changes. One is that the whole top of the robot comes off when you're doing anything like looking at the dustbin or adjusting anything with, let's say, the Wi-Fi settings. So that is, I think, a little more annoying than having a flap that comes up but stays on the robot. And then there's also no dedicated button to get the robot to return to its base. So one of the things I love about robot vacuums is they can, of course, clean the floor that they're on, but then you can also take them out of the base, put them somewhere else in your home, and then press a single button to get them started, and they'll map that new area and usually remember that area and then can clean that part as well. And then when it's done, it lets you know, and you can take it back to the base. But with one of these fancy base systems where it's docking and emptying and washing the mop and doing all this extra stuff, it's basically impossible for me as a human to just set the robot in its base. And so I just wish there was a dedicated button on the robot to make this easier, of telling it go back to the base once you've set it back near its home. Another issue I had with the robot itself was it dropped from my Wi-Fi at one point, so I had to reset up the Wi-Fi on the robot, which was actually pretty easy. You go in the app and you hit a button to reconnect and you scan the code on the robot, and then you go through the Wi-Fi part of the setup, but you don't have to remap your whole floor or do anything like that. Now, speaking of mapping the floor, of course, like a lot of robot vacuums, you can divide the robot's map into different rooms. So then you can use something like Google Voice Assistant or Amazon or even Apple's shortcuts to then trigger the vacuum to clean a particular room rather than the entire floor that it's on. And I love this for, let's say, after a meal, we can have the vacuum clean up the dining room. Well, then it's not getting in the way of whatever the kids are doing in the living room. And now there are also a lot of detailed settings about how this robot cleans and what it focuses on. I mentioned that it can focus on edges of your home earlier. There's also an improved housekeeper mode, is what ECOVACS calls it, where it sort of intelligently focuses on areas of the floor it needs to clean that it perceives as an issue. I tend to like just having it clean the same way every time. I don't tend to use these kind of modes, but there is a lot of intelligence and a lot of settings there that I could probably make an entire separate video just on all the details in the app. But some of those I just don't really care about much myself, so I'm telling you my experience. And the advantage there, I just say, is that you don't have to worry about all those settings if you don't want to. One thing to keep in mind as you might get one of these robots is the box is very big, of course, because it has the base station and the robot in the box with other manuals and accessories. But once you get the robot out of the box, the setup is very straightforward and easy. You download the ECOVACS app and it walks you through setting up the robot. You scan a QR code on the robot and set up the Wi-Fi connection. But one of the things that I find annoying about the setup process and just this robot in general is it's trying to promote ECOVACS' new voice assistant called Yiko. And you can talk to the robot using the voice assistant Yiko. And I just don't get it at all. Like, ECOVACS, stay in your lane, let other companies make the voice assistants, and then just integrate well with those. Having your own voice assistant and trying to make the robot something you can talk directly to, like, I get it from a perspective of a science fiction movie where you can talk to the robot. Like,
I never sound like that. I bet you could if you tried real hard.
At the same time, it's just in practical terms, a lot of people don't want another set of microphones and intelligent voice assistant listening to them in their home. And of course, you can turn all of this off, which is good. And so like I opted out of setting up Yiko in the app, but it definitely tries to push you towards, don't you want to use this voice assistant? And I'm just like, no. But the one thing I wish ECOVACS would add related to this is a dedicated hardware mute switch on the vacuum. So then you know the vacuum's microphones aren't listening to you. I mean, I trust that they aren't. I haven't set up the voice assistant, but it is a little bit weird there. And I just wish that they would have a dedicated mute switch on the vacuum. Then it just gives you a little more peace of mind that there's nothing in there listening. So I mentioned at the top of the video how quickly robot vacuums are improving. But at the end of the day, if you just keep waiting for next year's model, you're gonna miss out on all kinds of great quality of life improvements. And buying into a vacuum like the ECOVACS Deebot T20 Omni really sets you up for a lot of nice quality of life improvements, whether you're coming from no robot vacuum at all, or even one from, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago. Having your floors not only vacuumed well, but also mopped well at the same time makes a big difference, and I really appreciate it. So even though this vacuum isn't perfect, and even though I'm sure next year there'll be all kinds of even more amazing features with robot vacuums, I still think the Deebot T20 Omni is a great option to go with and gives you a lot of great performance for the, albeit a little bit expensive, price tag. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.